Let's get real. Most people are too afraid to tell you to your face that they don't like you. Instead, they hide behind fake smiles, hollow compliments, and forced politeness. I've been there too, thinking someone was a friend, only to find out they were secretly hoping for my downfall. It's brutal, but here's the truth. If you don't recognize the signs, you'll end up wasting your time and energy on people who, deep down, don't understand or respect you. So let's cut through the BS and talk about the signs that someone dislikes you but is hiding it. You might not like what you hear, but it's better to face the truth than live in denial. Number 1, they're always joking about your flaws. We all know that one person who loves to joke, especially when the joke is on you. They'll pick at your quirks, your mistakes, your little imperfections, and they do it with a smile saying, "I'm just messing with you." It seems harmless at first, but let's not kid ourselves. These jokes are often more than just playful banter. They're calculated digs cleverly disguised as humor, meant to chip away at your self-esteem bit by bit. I remember a time when I was close to someone who always had something to say about me. How I dressed, the way I spoke, even the projects I was working on. At first, I laughed it off, thinking it was all in good fun. But as time went on, I noticed a pattern. The jokes were always aimed at my perceived weaknesses, never at my strengths. It wasn't long before I started second-guessing myself, wondering if maybe I was the problem, if maybe these flaws were as glaring as they made them out to be. The hidden manipulation behind just joking. Here's where the controversy kicks in. People who consistently joke about your flaws aren't doing it out of affection. They're testing the waters to see how much disrespect you'll take. It's a subtle form of manipulation, a way for them to assert dominance while keeping you in your place. They're telling you, in no uncertain terms, that you're beneath them. And the most insidious part, they get away with it because we've been conditioned to believe that if we can't take a joke, we're the ones with the problem. But let's flip that script. I'm here to tell you that there's nothing wrong with standing up for yourself when a joke crosses the line. In fact, it's essential. You deserve to be around people who lift you up, not those who knock you down just to get a cheap laugh. True friends don't need to point out your flaws to feel better about themselves. They celebrate your strengths and help you work through your weaknesses without making you the butt of the joke. The slippery slope of disrespect. I've seen it happen time and again. People who let these kinds of jokes slide, thinking it's easier to keep the peace than to make waves. But here's the deep truth. Allowing others to disrespect you, even in jest, is a slippery slope. It starts with small comments, but over time, those jokes can wear you down, making you question your worth. And the more you allow it, the more they'll push, until you're left doubting yourself, all because you didn't want to seem too sensitive. I had to learn this the hard way. I realized that by laughing along, I was giving them permission to keep going. I was complicit in my own disrespect. It wasn't until I started pushing back, setting boundaries, that I noticed a shift. Not just in how they treated me, but in how I saw myself. I stopped letting their words define me and started owning my narrative, setting boundaries and taking back control. So here's my advice. The next time someone makes a joke at your expense, don't just laugh it off. Ask yourself, is this really funny? Or is there something more going on here? And if the answer is the latter, don't be afraid to call them out. It might be uncomfortable. It might even end the friendship. But your self-respect is worth far more than someone's misguided sense of humor. A simple response like, "I don't find that funny," or "You keep making these jokes. Are you trying to say something?" forces them to either admit their behavior or back off. If they get defensive, that tells you everything you need to know. Real friends will respect your boundaries. Fake ones will make you feel bad for having them. The people you keep around shape you. In the end, life's too short to surround yourself with people who can't see your value. If their idea of friendship is constantly pointing out your flaws, then it's time to find new friends. The ones who truly care about you will never need to put you down to feel good about themselves. Stand tall, speak up, and don't let anyone reduce you to a punchline. Because the reality is this: the people who make you feel small aren't worth your time. And the sooner you recognize that, the stronger and more self-assured you'll become. Number 2, they give compliments that sting like insults. We've all been there. Someone gives you a compliment, But instead of feeling good, you're left with a bitter aftertaste, like you've just been slapped with a velvet glove. It's the kind of compliment that makes you pause and think, wait, was that a compliment or an insult? And here's the harsh reality. Often it's a bit of both. These backhanded compliments are a subtle, almost sneaky way for people to undermine you while pretending to be kind. I remember a time when I was working on a big project that I was incredibly proud of. After putting in countless hours of hard work, I finally shared it with a group of colleagues. One of them, someone I thought was a supporter, smiled and said, "Wow, this is actually pretty good for someone like you." I stood there stunned. On the surface, it seemed like a compliment, but those last few words, "for someone like you," hit me like a ton of bricks. What did that even mean? Was I not supposed to be capable of doing good work? And that's the controversy here. These so-called compliments are laced with a hidden agenda. They're not meant to uplift you. They're designed to keep you in your place. It's a power play, a way for the person giving the compliment to assert their superiority while making you doubt your own abilities. They're saying, "I see you trying, but you'll never be as good as me." It's toxic, but it's wrapped up in such a pretty package that you almost miss the poison inside. Let's be real. People who give backhanded compliments are often insecure themselves. They see your potential, your strengths, and it scares them. So they use these sly little digs to keep you second-guessing yourself, to make sure you don't rise too high. It's like they're patting you on the back while holding you down with the other hand. It's a way to remind you of your place, as if you should be grateful just to be included. And here's where it gets even more controversial. We've all done it at some point. Maybe not intentionally, but we've all let our insecurities slip out in the form of a compliment that's meant to remind someone else of their place. Think about it. Have you ever said, "You actually did a great job on that"? Or, "Wow, you really surprised me with how well you handled that"? The implication is clear. You didn't expect them to do well, and now they should feel lucky that you noticed. It's subtle, but it's damaging. But here's the deep message. You don't have to accept this disguised hostility. You have the power to reject it, to see it for what it really is. A reflection of their own insecurities, not a measure of your worth. When someone says, "You're smarter than you look," or "This is good considering you're new at this," you don't have to swallow it whole. Call it out for what it is, even if it makes things awkward. Because if you don't, you're allowing them to dictate how you see yourself. And that's a power you should never hand over to anyone. I've learned to recognize these compliments for what they are, a mirror reflecting someone else's insecurities. And when you see it that way, it loses its sting. Instead of internalizing it, you can almost laugh it off. Because at the end of the day, their words say more about them than they ever will about you. So here's what I do now. When I receive a backhanded compliment, I don't let it slide. I'll respond with something like, "Thanks, but what do you mean by that?" It forces them to confront the insult hidden in their words, and more often than not, it puts them on the spot. They're suddenly aware that you're not playing their game, and it's amazing how quickly their tune changes. Sometimes they stammer, sometimes they backtrack, and sometimes they even admit they didn't mean it that way. But either way, they learn that you're not an easy target. The takeaway? Don't let anyone's veiled negativity define you. Whether it's a well-meaning friend, a jealous colleague, or even a family member, remember this. Your worth isn't up for debate. Compliments should lift you up, not tear you down. If someone's words leave you questioning yourself, it's time to question their intentions instead. Life is too short to waste on people who can't genuinely celebrate your successes. Surround yourself with those who see your value and aren't afraid to let you know it, without any strings attached. Because real friends, real supporters, don't need to undercut you to make themselves feel better. They don't need to disguise insults as praise. They lift you up because they believe in you, not because they need to keep you in check. So the next time someone gives you one of those compliments that makes you pause, trust your gut. If it doesn't feel right, there's a reason. And if you have to question whether it was truly a compliment, chances are it wasn't. Stand firm, set your boundaries, and don't let anyone make you feel small, just so they can feel big. Because at the end of the day. Number 3, they subtly exclude you from plans. It's the little things that sting the most, like realizing that your so-called friends accidentally forgot to invite you to that dinner, that party, or that weekend getaway. They'll swear it was an oversight, that it was a last-minute thing, or worse, they'll assume you were too busy anyway. But let's be real, these aren't accidents. This is social exclusion in its sneakiest form, and it's a clear sign that you're not as valued as you think. I've been on the receiving end of this too many times. I remember checking my phone one weekend and seeing pictures of a group of friends having a great time at an event I would have loved to attend. The kicker? Not a single person mentioned it to me beforehand. When I casually brought it up later, they were full of excuses. "Oh, we thought you were busy," or "It was such a last-minute plan." But deep down, I knew the truth. If they wanted me there, they would have made sure I knew about it. And here's where the controversy comes in. This kind of exclusion isn't just thoughtlessness, it's deliberate. It's a way of sending a message without saying a word. They don't want you there, but they don't have the guts to tell you to your face. Instead, they hope you'll just fade out of the group quietly without causing a scene. It's passive-aggressive, it's cowardly, but it's also incredibly common. People don't talk about this much because it's easier to pretend it's not happening. It's easier to swallow the excuses, to convince yourself that it really was just a mistake rather than face the painful truth that you're being pushed out. But here's the thing. If you keep accepting those excuses, you're giving them permission to keep excluding you. You're letting them decide your place in their lives rather than taking control of your own narrative. I had to learn this the hard way. For a while, I kept quiet, letting those accidental exclusions slide, hoping that maybe next time I'd be included. But then I realized that by staying silent, I was allowing myself to be treated as an afterthought. So I did something controversial. I started calling them out on it. I'd say, "Hey, I saw you guys went out last weekend. Why didn't anyone invite me?" It wasn't easy, and it definitely made things awkward, but it also forced them to confront their behavior. And guess what? The dynamics changed. Some people got defensive, some tried to make up for it, and others simply drifted away. But the bottom line was clear. I wasn't going to let them exclude me without a fight. Here's the deeper message. If people want you in their lives, they'll make the effort to include you, no matter how last-minute the plan is. And if they don't, then it's time to rethink the value of those relationships. You deserve to be around people who don't make you feel like you're constantly chasing after their approval or their attention. True friends don't forget to invite you. They make sure you're there because they genuinely enjoy your company. So if you find yourself being subtly excluded from plans, don't just brush it off. Confront it. Ask the hard questions. Be prepared for the answers, even if they're not what you want to hear. Because at the end of the day, it's better to know where you truly stand than to be left wondering why you were left out again. And remember this, you're not a backup option, you're a priority. Surround yourself with people who treat you like one. Number 4, they're busy only when it comes to you. We've all heard it before. "I'm so busy these days, sorry I can't hang out." It's the perfect excuse. After all, who isn't busy? But what happens when you start noticing a pattern? They're always available for others, posting pictures of their outings, catching up with mutual friends. But when it comes to you, suddenly they're swamped. Here's the cold, hard truth. They're not too busy. They're just too busy for you. I've been in that frustrating situation more times than I care to admit. I remember reaching out to a friend I used to be close with, trying to set up a time to catch up. Every time I suggested something, they had an excuse. "I'm working late. I've got a lot on my plate. Maybe next week." Meanwhile, I'd see them hanging out with other people, having a great time, somehow always finding a way to make time for everyone, except me. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to see the pattern. The message they were sending was loud and clear. I wasn't a priority in their life anymore. And here's where the controversy comes in. We've been conditioned to accept busy as a valid reason to be pushed aside. But let's be honest, people make time for what and who they care about. If they're constantly busy when it comes to you, it's not about their schedule. It's about their priorities. And that's a hard pill to swallow because it forces you to confront the reality that you might not be as important to them as they are to you. The harsh reality is that busy is often a polite way of saying, I don't want to spend time with you. It's easier for them to blame it on their schedule than to admit that they're choosing not to include you in their life. It's a passive-aggressive way of keeping you at arm's length without having to deal with the confrontation that would come with telling you the truth. They want to keep you on the hook just in case, without actually investing in the relationship. I've been on both sides of this. There were times when I was the one making excuses because I didn't know how to tell someone that I'd outgrown the friendship. I convinced myself that avoiding the conversation was kinder than being honest. But being on the receiving end taught me a valuable lesson. It's better to be upfront, even if it's uncomfortable, than to string someone along with excuses. When I finally called out my friend on always being too busy, the conversation was awkward, but it was necessary. It gave me the clarity I needed to move on and invest my time and energy in relationships where I was valued. And here's what I learned. If you have to constantly chase someone down to spend time with them, they're not meant to be in your life. The people who genuinely care about you won't make you beg for their time. They'll offer it freely because they enjoy your company. Your time is precious, and so is your energy. Don't waste it on people who can't be bothered to make time for you. If someone is constantly too busy for you, it's time to reassess the relationship. You deserve to be around people who are excited to see you, who make an effort to include you in their lives, not just when it's convenient for them, but because they genuinely value your presence. It's important to recognize that people change, and so do relationships. Sometimes we hold on to people out of habit, nostalgia, or fear of being alone, even when they've clearly moved on. But there's strength in letting go, in acknowledging that you deserve more than someone's leftover time. It's not about being needy or demanding. It's about valuing yourself enough to walk away from those who don't value you. There's a simple truth that many of us struggle to accept. If someone truly cares, they will make an effort. No one is too busy to send a quick message, to check in, or to make plans if they really want to. Life is hectic, sure, but when someone genuinely values you, they will find a way to include you. You won't have to wonder where you stand with them, because they'll show you through their actions. I've seen people make excuses for their friends over and over again. Oh, they're just really busy right now. They'll reach out when they have time. But months go by and nothing changes. And at some point, you have to stop waiting for them to remember you. Walking away from one-sided relationships isn't easy. It can be painful to admit that someone you care about doesn't feel the same way, but it's also liberating. When you stop chasing after people who won't make time for you, you create space for those who will. You shift your energy toward relationships that are built on mutual respect and effort. So here's the deep message. Stop making excuses for people who don't prioritize you. Stop waiting for texts that never come. Stop rearranging your schedule for someone who wouldn't do the same for you. Choose yourself. Choose people who show up, who make time, who don't leave you questioning where you stand. Because at the end of the day, the right people, the people who truly care, will never be too busy for you. Number 5, they avoid physical contact like the plague. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, physical contact, or rather the lack of it. And no, this isn't just about romantic relationships. Physical contact is a fundamental aspect of human connection. It's a silent but powerful way of building trust, showing warmth, and reinforcing bonds. So what does it mean when someone actively avoids even the most casual touch with you? The answer isn't pretty. They're sending a clear message, and whether they realize it or not, their body language is screaming discomfort. It's time to pay attention. I once had a colleague who subtly but consistently recoiled every time I reached out for a handshake or offered a friendly pat on the back. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe they just weren't the touchy-feely type. But then I noticed something strange. It wasn't everyone they reacted to this way. They were warm, tactile, and physically engaging with other colleagues, freely offering high fives, shoulder taps, and handshakes. When it came to me, though, it was as if I had the plague. That's when it hit me. Their avoidance of physical contact wasn't just a personality quirk. It was a deliberate way of maintaining distance. And here's where things get controversial. Physical contact is a natural part of human interaction. It's how we express warmth, trust, and comfort with others. When someone persistently avoids touching you, they're making a statement, even if it's one they don't vocalize. Sure, some people simply aren't comfortable with physical touch, and that's perfectly valid. But when it's selective, when they have no problem hugging and shaking hands with others but stiffen up around you, that's a red flag. It's not just about personal boundaries, it's about personal preference. And their preference is to keep you at arm's length, literally and figuratively. Let's be honest, we've all been on both sides of this situation at some point. Maybe you've instinctively pulled back when someone leaned in too close. Or perhaps you felt that awkward moment when you reached out for a handshake only for the other person to hesitate. Maybe you've noticed how someone shifts away when you sit next to them, or how their body tenses up when you gesture toward them. It's uncomfortable, it's awkward, and more often than not, it's a sign that something in the relationship isn't as solid as you'd like to think. Here's the deeper truth. Physical contact is more than just a fleeting moment of interaction. It's a representation of trust, of closeness, of a level of ease between two people. When someone avoids it with you, they're not just avoiding a touch, they're avoiding the intimacy and vulnerability that come with it. They're creating a boundary that says, I don't feel completely comfortable around you, whether consciously or subconsciously. That's a hard pill to swallow, but it's also an important realization. I've learned to pay close attention to these cues, even when it's uncomfortable to admit what they mean. There was a time when I chose to ignore the signs, convincing myself that someone's reluctance to get physically close was just their personality. But the more I reflected on it, the more I realized it was about our relationship, not just their nature. When I finally confronted the situation, sometimes directly, sometimes through quiet observation, it led to some difficult but necessary conversations. And in some cases, it led to the realization that the relationship wasn't as deep or reciprocal as I had thought. So what do you do when you notice this pattern? You don't just sweep it under the rug. You don't make excuses or rationalize it away. You acknowledge it. If it's someone you care about, ask yourself if this is a one-off occurrence or a persistent issue. If you feel the need, address it. Something as simple as, hey, I've noticed you seem a little distant lately. Is everything okay? Can open the door to clarity. The response may be enlightening, or it may confirm what you already suspect, that the connection isn't as strong as you'd hoped. And here's the deep message. Don't ignore the signs. When someone consistently avoids physical contact with you, it's not just an isolated behavior, it's an indication of where you stand in their life. If they make the effort to be close with others, but resist even the smallest gestures with you, it's time to stop pretending everything is fine. It might be an unspoken discomfort, a hidden resentment, or even a subconscious distancing tactic. Whatever the reason, it's worth acknowledging rather than living in denial. You deserve relationships where physical contact isn't something to be dodged, but something that happens naturally, comfortably, and without hesitation. Whether it's a friendly hug, a handshake, or just sitting side by side without feeling tension in the air, these small gestures matter. They build trust, solidify friendships, and create warmth. If someone consistently avoids them, that's a statement, one you shouldn't ignore. Don't be afraid to ask the tough questions, and if necessary, make the tough decisions. Because at the end of the day, life is too short to be surrounded by people who keep you at a distance, literally and figuratively. Number 6, they disappear when you need support. Nothing reveals the true nature of a relationship quite like a crisis. When everything is smooth sailing, it's easy to surround yourself with people who laugh with you, celebrate your successes, and enjoy your company. But when life takes a turn for the worse, when you're struggling, vulnerable, or in need of real support, that's when you see people for who they truly are. And what does it say about someone when they vanish the moment you need them most? It's not just a sign of flakiness. It's a glaring, undeniable warning that they were never as invested in you as you thought. And let's be honest, when someone disappears during your darkest hours, it's not just hurtful. It feels like a betrayal. I learned this the hard way during one of the toughest times of my life. I was dealing with a deeply personal issue, something that rattled me to my core. Naturally, I turned to the people I had always considered close friends, the ones I had been there for in their times of need. I wasn't asking for grand gestures, just a simple message, a call, some acknowledgement that I wasn't alone in my struggle. But what did I get? Silence. The same people who used to text me daily, who had no problem calling me when they needed to vent, suddenly had every excuse in the book. I'm so swamped at work. Things are just crazy right now. I'll check in soon. Spoiler alert, they never did. Here's where things get controversial. People love to talk about how they'll always be there for you. They love to throw around phrases like ride or die, I got you, or we're family. But when push comes to shove, when their presence is actually required, many of them quietly slip away. They'll party with you, laugh with you, and celebrate your wins. But the minute things get heavy, they're nowhere to be found. The reason? It's easier for them to ghost you than to deal with your pain. Your suffering makes them uncomfortable, and the hard truth is, they don't care enough to push past that discomfort. Real support isn't about convenience. It's about showing up when it's hard, when it's messy, and when it's the last thing they feel like doing. The people who disappear when you need them most aren't just inconsiderate. They're showing you exactly where you stand in their life. Their actions are saying, without words, your problems aren't worth my time. I remember how gut-wrenching it was to realize that the same people I had supported in their breakups, their family dramas, and their career struggles couldn't be bothered to return the favor. It was a painful but necessary wake-up call. Not everyone who smiles in your face is truly in your corner. Some people are just there for the good times. When you're no longer a source of fun, entertainment, or benefit, they quietly move on. But here's the deeper message. Support is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. It's easy to show up when things are great, but the true test of any friendship, any bond, is what happens when things fall apart. If someone disappears the moment you need them, they weren't really there in the first place. And that realization, as painful as it is actually a gift. It allows you to see people for who they really are, and more importantly, to stop wasting your energy on those who don't deserve it. Don't let the absence of these fair-weather friends make you bitter. Let it make you better. Use it as a filter to sift out those who don't truly care. Instead of chasing after people who don't prioritize you, redirect that energy into the relationships that matter. The ones who check in, who show up even when it's inconvenient, who remind you that you're not alone. Those are the people worth investing in. And as for those who disappear, let them go. They've already shown you their true colors. Life is too short to hold space for people who can't be bothered to stand by you in the storm. Surround yourself with those rare individuals who don't just bask in the sunshine with you, but will also stand beside you in the rain. Because when you find those people, the ones who don't run when things get tough, you've found something truly worth holding on to. Number 7, they gossip about you behind your back. Gossip, it's the social poison that spreads faster than wildfire and can burn down relationships in an instant. The thing about gossip is that it's never as innocent as people make it out to be. When someone you consider a friend talks behind your back, they're not just sharing a harmless story. They're actively sabotaging your trust, your reputation, and your relationship. And let's be real, when they gossip about you, it's a clear sign that they don't respect you, no matter how friendly they act to your face. I've been the subject of gossip before, and let me tell you, it's one of the most gut-wrenching experiences you can go through. There was a time when I confided in someone I thought was a close friend about a personal issue. I needed a vent, to unload some of the weight I was carrying, and I trusted this person to keep it between us. But within days, details of that conversation started circulating, twisted and exaggerated. It was like a game of telephone, except the message wasn't just getting lost, it was being weaponized against me. The person I trusted had turned my vulnerability into entertainment for others. Here's the controversial truth. People who gossip about you aren't just venting or sharing concerns. They're playing a power game. Gossip is a way for them to elevate themselves while putting you down, all without having to confront you directly. It's cowardly, manipulative, and toxic. They're not just damaging your reputation, they're damaging the very foundation of trust that any real relationship is built on. And let's get one thing straight. People who gossip about others to you will gossip about you to others. It's a pattern, not a one-time thing. I've seen it happen too many times to count. Someone who loves to spill the tea on everyone else suddenly goes quiet when they're around you. Guess what? That probably means they're spilling your tea when you're not around. It's a betrayal of the worst kind because it's done in the shadows, without giving you a chance to defend yourself or even know what's being said. Now here's where it gets really personal. I remember confronting the friend who gossiped about me, expecting some sort of apology or at least an explanation. Instead, they acted like it was no big deal, brushing it off as just a bit of harmless talk. But here's the thing. Gossip is never harmless. It's a betrayal, plain and simple. And it says far more about the person spreading it than it does about the person it's about. The hardest pill to swallow is that not everyone who smiles in your face is truly in your corner. There are people who will pretend to be supportive, who will act like they care, but the moment you turn your back, they're eager to whisper about you to anyone who will listen. And the worst part, they'll often disguise it as concern. "I'm just worried about them," they'll say, as they spread your business to people who have no right to know. So what do? First, you recognize the signs. If someone is always eager to share gossip with you, chances are they're doing the same behind your back. If you start hearing rumors about yourself that only a handful of people could know, take note of who had access to that information. People who truly respect you won't make your private struggles a topic of conversation. Second, don't engage in gossip yourself. It's tempting, especially when you feel wronged, to retaliate by spilling someone else's secrets. But that just makes you part of the same toxic cycle. Instead, distance yourself from those who thrive on gossip. You don't need to make a dramatic exit. Just slowly remove yourself from their company and protect your energy. Lastly, confront the behavior when necessary. If you discover someone has been spreading lies or sharing your private information, call them out. It doesn't have to be a dramatic confrontation, but a simple, "I heard you were talking about me. Why?" is enough to make them squirm. Most people who gossip are cowards. They do it behind your back because they don't have the courage to say things to your face. Putting them on the spot forces them to confront their actions. At the end of the day, relationships should be built on trust, not fear of betrayal. Surround yourself with people who respect your privacy, who don't feel the need to elevate themselves by putting you down, and who see your vulnerability as something to protect, not exploit. Because real friends don't gossip about you. They stand up for you when you're not around. And those who can't, let them go. They were never truly in your corner to begin with.